Hey guys, it's Kayla back again with another video today. I am doing multiple gatefold cards here. I'm going to end up with 6 in the end. I started off planning to do 8, but a couple of them didn't work out along the way. So I'm going to show you how I did them. The first thing I did was trim down all of my cardstock to 11 by 5.5. So I trimmed each piece down. Now the sheets that were already 8.5 by 11 were easy. They just had to be trimmed one way, and the 12 by 12s had to be trimmed obviously in multiple ways, but that's no big deal. So the next thing is to score them, and I scored them all at 2 3/4 from each end. That way they fold perfectly in the middle, like this. And then afterwards I just kind of piled them up. I didn't kind of use the bone folder to score but to flatten the seams down perfectly, because I did that in the end after I put everything on, because I still had a lot of work to do in and out of the card. So now I'm going to haul out my paper pad by Lawn Fawn. I have this one, and then there is another one as well that I'm going to use that I just don't have on camera, but they're the Perfectly Plaid winter sets. And what I'm doing is I'm picking out the matching patterns and diagonal and vertical pattern, and I'm separating them out. The ones that the stripes go vertical and horizontal will be cut for the side edge panels, and the other ones will be for the frame that we're going to put onto the front. So for the edge panels, we're going to trim them down to 5 1/4 by 2.5 inches. So it'll be just 1/4 inch smaller than the outside gates of the gatefold card. So I'm going to trim all of those vertically and horizontally striped pieces down to that size first. And from each of these sheets I am able to get 2 of the panels out of them, so I don't need more than one 6x6 sheet of paper to get them. So I'm going to cut all of those out, which you'll see is done there. And now for all the diagonal stripes, I'm going to grab this die set that I got from Stampin' Up. I don't have the name of it offhand, but I will leave it in the description box. And I'm going to take the second largest die and cut them all out with that one. So that is going to be on the front of the card as well. So right now I'm just preparing all the elements for the front of the card. I'm not assembling anything until the very end. So now I'm going to take that same die set, and one size smaller than the one we just used. I'm going to cut a bunch of white cardstock, and as well as some foam to give these dimension. And I'm going to run all of those through the die cut machine as well. So once I had all of those die cut pieces cut out, I set them aside, and I'm going to start on the die cuts for the inside of the card. I'm going to be using the Lawn Fawn Stitched Hillside Borders set, and I'm just going to be using the 2 of the least wavy sets, or the least wavy dies from the set. So for this I'm just going to take some plain white cardstock, and I'm going to cut them all down to the same size as the outer gate panels for the outside, and the inside it'll be slightly smaller, so each one will be 1/4 inch less. So for the gate panels on the sides would be 2.5 inches wide. The length doesn't really matter. And for the middle section, because the middle section is 5.5 inches, I'm going to put it at 5 1/4 inches. And once again, the height doesn't really matter because we will be cutting them on the machine. Now the way I cut them might be a little unusual, but for me it works great, is I take both dies and I put them just upside down onto one sheet of cardstock, and I will double cut at the same time. I'll run 2 sheets of cardstock through the machine at once. So that way what I have to do after it cuts, I take off the pieces that are die cut, and the tape that I'm putting on here will hold everything else in place so that the 2 dies will stay attached to the middle piece of cardstock, and I just have to line that back up with the next sheet. So it is a really quick process when I do it like that. And then for the sides where I want them to line up, you'll see this weird frame shape that I'm making, and this is so that I can line up the dies onto the panel that go onto the side with the middle sections and tape them into place and run them through the die machine the same way. I'll put them on, I'll put on a bunch of tape to hold them to that cardstock, and then each time that they go through the machine I add a couple pieces of cardstock underneath and just take off the die cut piece at each time. So it works quite well for me. It does take a little bit of getting used to, but it does work quite well once you get the hang of how to do it. So now that that is all die cut out, I've put them in order. The top row that you see there is going to be the first layer that goes onto the card, and the second row underneath that will be the second layer that goes onto the card. So I just adhere each piece down, starting with the sides, the center, to line them all up to make sure that they are around the same distance from the edge each time. And then I go and I take the second row and I will layer them right on top of the first row. It's hard to see on the camera. I'm not quite sure. My lighting is being very strange in the last few videos I've tried to film, which is one of the reasons I haven't posted too much, is I'm trying to get this figured out so it doesn't look so blue. But once I put them on, in person you do see the stitch lines and you do see the little bit of dimension to it. I mean, there's no foam tape or anything, but it definitely looks like it has some dimension to it. So once I do that, I'm now going to start on the outside of the card, and we're going to haul out the little panels that we cut earlier that were, once again, they were 2.5 by 5.25, and I'm going to adhere each set of those onto the front of the card just using my glue runner. I just try and be very careful to get the glue as close to the edges as possible, and I do put a decent amount of glue onto it for it. I don't want it coming off if I happen to send it through the mail, or just over time I don't want it falling off. The glue runner I use is just from Walmart. It's the AdTech brand, and I find the glue on it is extremely unforgiving. You can't move it once you start to stick it on. You can't kind of readjust it. It's not repositionable. It's permanent on contact. So for future reference, I probably will be using a different type of glue. I did order a new glue runner not long ago, and hopefully that comes in soon enough. I'd like to try a little bit of something different, because this one here, like I said, if I put something down and I don't like the position of it, it's stuck there. I have to tear it up to get it back off, and that tears the cardstock and the paper along with it. So now I've got all of those done, and I'm going to start working onto the foam and front pieces, I guess we'll call them, the embellishment that goes on the front. Now, the way I'm doing it here with using the scissors in it, I realize now that I didn't need to do that, and for future reference I won't be doing that. But I was thinking in my head that if I cut them in half, I could spread them out a bit more and spread the dimension a little bit better. But for future reference, no, I'm just going to glue the foam down in one piece, and then you'll see I'm taking the white paper and gluing that down and cutting it as well. But I'm just going to do it all in one piece, just make a little sandwich and glue only half of it onto the card front, instead of doing this way where I only glue the foam to the card front on one side, because I don't want it to stick on both sides, obviously. So the side that has the paper covering the foam is the side that you see when you open the card, but the side with just that's hidden or that nobody will ever see, I didn't bother putting paper on it. Now looking back, I just should have not cut that slice right there, because it does look a little bad in the end. So when I make some more of them, I'm not going to be doing that step. I'm just going to put them on top of each other just like a sandwich. Now when I was making these, I prepared a bunch of them at once, so when I came back here, this was after going off camera and setting up 5 or 6 other ones. And so now all I have to do is glue them onto the card front. Like I said, I put the adhesive on the blue foam and stuck that piece onto the front. Now I just eyeballed everything. I don't get meticulous when it comes to measurements, so I just put it down on the front where I thought it should be, and the foam adhered it to the card, and that was perfectly fine for me. So that was what I did with that, and I did that with all 6 of them. And now I decided to do my sentiments before I moved on any further. I'm using a set I'm using a set once again from the dollar store, and the sentiment Baby It's Cold Outside and Let It Snow. I once again hauling out my mini Misty because I will need to stamp these a few times on top of each other. They aren't the best quality stamps, but I do like the look of them, so I put up with them. I've lined my little cutouts onto the 2-inch mark onto the mini Misty. That way each time I know when I put it in, that's where it goes. And I did that with both the Baby It's Cold Outside and the Let It Snow, which you see me putting in here now. So now I start putting all of the sentiment pieces onto the cards, and all I do for that is the same thing with every other sentiment sticker you put on. You just put some glue runner or adhesive onto it and then adhere it onto the center of that piece. Now for me, I like to unfold that panel to make sure it gets pretty flat on there and not raised in any way possible. Now I did want to use foam tape for it, but I didn't happen to have any left at the moment. It's still on its way in. So the next thing I'm going to do is start with all of my little images to go inside of the card. I'm using Mama Elephant's reindeer games, and I'm using my Misty because I want these all to stay in the exact same spot for the die cutting, because I'm going to be using a certain technique for it, and I want them all to stay exactly as they are. Plus I do have to stamp them a couple of times each, because they just, I don't know, they just seem to do that for this set for me. Maybe I got a bad set, I'm not sure, but I do have to stamp them multiple times. Even if I do it just on a regular stamping block, I don't find I get a good clear image. That might be user error, however. And then after that, I'm going to take the tree and the presents, the little birdie, and some candy canes and stamp them on as well. I didn't end up using the candy canes or the little bow tie that goes on top of the Christmas gifts. I just used something else in its place. And all I did to stamp multiple times on the same sheet was just move it down a little bit each time and stamp. And then for all of the trees, I'm just doing that with a stamping block because I am doing many of them, and I only have one die for it, so they don't have to be in any particular order. I'm just stamping these on randomly, and I will color them all off camera. And I like to color off camera because I like to take them into the bedroom and watch some TV while I color. And for this one here, I decided to use some watercolor pencils, and I just have the Crayola brand. It's the cheapest brand I found, and I find it works good enough for me as long as you don't go too heavy-handed. I'm also using these Derwent brush pens, and I used mostly the number 1 brush. That was the first brush that we showed for pretty much all of these here. So here I'm just showing you all of the ones that I colored. They're all relatively the same. The only difference is some of the trees are a little bit darker than the other, but did that kind of on purpose. I want a little bit of variety into my system. So to die cut them out, I'm using the trick from Jennifer McGuire, using the press and seal from Glade. I'm not sure exactly if it's like a saran wrap or anything like that, but the press and seal from Glade. I did have to adjust one of them once I put it down, but it was very easy just to peel back and adjust. So from there, I took it and I run it through the die cut machine between the 2 plates, just like normal. And then when it came out, it was fairly easy to peel off the sheet from the plate and peel off the cardstock from the paper without moving any of the dies. Now I was being fairly gentle with this first run because I hadn't tried this technique before, but by the end of it I wasn't being as gentle and it was working just as fine. So I just gave it a gentle little push from behind and it popped right out so I could grab it. So after I die cut all of the reindeers and the trees and the gifts and everything like that, it was time to start assembling the card. Now, after I finished die cutting, I did do a little spritzing of distress paint or distress ink stain, spray stain, that's what it is, picket fence, white picket fence, and I did just kind of splash that on there before I started putting everything together. For the adhesive, I only used the multimedia matte from Ranger. My bottle is almost done there. I'm trying to squeeze every last drop out of it before I open a new one. And I'm just placing them on kind of sporadically, and then I will put the trees on and as well as the little gifts. And for the little gifts where I didn't want to cut out all those tiny little bows that came with the stamp set, what I did instead is, you'll see in a moment, I took some doodle designs twine or thread, and I used it to tie little bows on my own. It was a time-consuming process, but it does look quite nice. I do like it. I did that for one of the cards, and for the rest of them I did just use embroidery thread to make the rest of the bows. I put bows on probably about one or sometimes both gifts in each card, but for some of them I did put the little bird on the card, and I will show you all of the cards I made at the end of the video. So after I kind of placed everything onto where I wanted it, I did have out my white gel pen and my Wink of Stella clear pen, because I did thought I would use the white gel pen to kind of dot over all of the reindeers wherever snow would have been. I only ended up doing it on one card. It didn't look that impressive. It didn't seem to make any difference, but I did use the Wink of Stella on all of the trees to make them look a little frosted. Not sure if you can quite see it on camera. I know sometimes you can't, and in the pictures I can't quite see it that well either. Like I said, my lighting, I'm still working on getting it kind of better. After that, I took another dollar store stamp set and the sentiment Merry Christmas, and I just stamped it dead center of the center of every card. So this is what they all look like, and I will just open and close each one for you so you can see. There isn't very much to talk about at this point. So these were the cards I made. I managed to make, I think, like I said, 6 of them. I originally planned to make 8, and it did take me a total of about, I'm gonna say 4 hours to do all of them. Thanks to the wonder of editing, crappy editing, it's going to take a lot less than that for you to watch the video. But it did take me about 4 hours. That was taking a break and then watching TV while I was coloring. Like, I wasn't in any rush to do them. So I do have lots of pieces left over, and so I'm going to make some more, not gay cards, but the snowy scene cards, definitely. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, let me know. Give it a thumbs up, leave a comment, subscribe if you want to see any more, and happy crafting!